All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Yeah, always a good one.
I was looking over what you sent, and it's fascinating.
Oh, good.
It's more than just the strategies. It's like we're also getting a look at Sun Tzu himself.
It really is.
Hmm.
And all the commentary, too, it's like a multi-layered thing. You know, you get the original stuff, but then you get what all these other great minds through history have thought about it, too.
Okay, so I'm going to jump right in here.
Go for it.
Victory without fighting. That's a powerful concept.
Yeah, for sure.
Sun Tzu says the ultimate win is avoiding battle altogether. How's that work exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems a bit counterintuitive at first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what he's really getting at is that true mastery, it lies in subduing the enemy without actually fighting.
So if you're good enough, they just give up.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more like you've outmaneuvered them so well that they have to. Like in chess. Think
Yeah.
about a really good chess game where you've got your opponent cornered.
They're checkmated.
Yeah, exactly, checkmated. But you got there without actually taking the king, right? They just had to concede.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm already seeing how this could be applied to other stuff, not just war.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Sun Tzu, you know?
Yeah.
This stuff, it applies everywhere.
Like negotiations?
Yeah, negotiations for sure. Any kind of competition, really.
You go into it knowing all sides, knowing all the angles. You've already won.
Yeah, you've already won, exactly. You achieve your objectives, but without all the losses, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
So on the battlefield, the losses are soldiers, casualties, but,
But in business.
well, in business, it's time wasted, it's resources wasted, that kind of thing.
That's so interesting. So victory without fighting, that's the goal.
That's the goal.
How do we get there? The excerpts you sent, they emphasize knowing yourself and your enemy. What does that mean exactly?
Ah, yeah, that's a big one. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. That's Sun Tzu. He's basically saying intelligence is everything, right? You got to know your own strengths and weaknesses just as well as you know theirs.
Man, this reminds me of this time I was making a pitch to this client. They were tough, notoriously tough.
Oh, yeah, everyone knows that type.
Yeah, but I went in prepared. I knew what they cared about, what their priorities were. I knew all their concerns beforehand, and I addressed them all,
That's amazing.
tailored everything to their needs.
That's brilliant.
It was all about, knowing them and knowing, what I could bring to the table.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly what Sun Tzu's talking about. You are minimizing risk by being as prepared as possible, right?
Totally.
That preparation, that's your edge.
Okay, so knowing yourself and your enemy is key. But then I'm looking at these excerpts, and there's also stuff here about deception and surprise. What's that all about? Is the art of war advocating for trickery?
Well, it's not about just being dishonest.
Right.
It's strategic, right? It's about using misdirection to keep your opponent off balance.
So if I'm going into a negotiation, I shouldn't show them all my cards right away.
Not necessarily, no. It's about timing. Sun Tzu emphasizes the element of surprise,
Yeah.
right? You use what they expect against them. You got to keep them guessing.
Oh, that's interesting.
But even when you're being strategic like that, there's still an ethical element.
Right.
Sun Tzu's big on integrity. You can be strategic without being malicious.
That makes sense. And then, there's this whole idea of adaptation and flexibility. It's like he's saying, have a plan, yeah, but be ready to change on the fly if you need to.
Yeah, you got to be ready to pivot. He uses this analogy of water.
Yeah.
Right? Water adapts to the shape of the ground it flows over.
Yeah.
Right? So a successful general, Sun Tzu argues, has to be like that too.
Adaptable.
Adaptable, exactly. Things are always changing on the battlefield, so you got to adjust your strategies to fit, right?
Reminds me of this event I was planning. Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
It was a nightmare. Caterer bailed, power outage at the venue. It was chaos.
Oh, no.
But we had to adapt, We had to think on our feet.
Yeah, you had to.
And in the end, the event was a success because we were flexible.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's the art of war in action right there.
Right.
No plan survives first contact with the enemy and all.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's all about improvisation.
Yeah.
You got to be able to improvise.
Okay. So this is all fascinating, but I kind of want to get a more concrete example.
So,
Like,
yeah.
how did these principles actually play out in battle?
Well, there's this story about Sun Tzu training King Hulu's concubines.
Hold on. Concubine.
Concubines.
What do concubines have to do with military strategy?
Well, the king, he was skeptical of Sun Tzu's methods.
Oh, I see.
So Sun Tzu said, all right, let me show you.
Okay.
He divided up all the concubines into two companies, led by the king's two favorites.
Okay.
and he tried to drill them in some basic military maneuvers.
Ooh, I bet that didn't go so well.
Well, at first, no. It was a disaster. The women, they were giggling, disobeying orders. I mean, the king thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
But Sun Tzu, he was dead serious.
Oh, this is about to take a dark turn, isn't it?
He's like, look, if the orders are not clear, that's on the general, right? But if the orders are clear and they're not being obeyed, then it's the officer's fault.
Oh.
And to prove his point,
No way.
he ordered the king's favorite concubines beheaded.
Oh my gosh.
The king, he was horrified, right? Begged Sun Tzu to reconsider, but he wouldn't budge. He said, no, look, I've accepted command. I can't let personal feelings get in the way of discipline.
Wow. I mean, talk about commitment to your principles, right? So what happened after that?
Well, the rest of the concubines, let's just say they got the message.
Right.
They performed those drills perfectly after that. It was a pretty brutal way to make a point, but he demonstrated the importance of discipline, right? You got to have a clear communication, and the commander has to have absolute authority. Yeah, that's a good lesson, but a pretty intense story. So discipline is crucial, but Sun Tzu also talks about foraging on the enemy. That one sounds kind of interesting. What's that all about?
So this was a tactic used by Chinese armies all throughout history.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, one famous example is Pan Chao's expedition to the Caspian Sea. So basically, instead of relying solely on your own supplies, which can be super expensive to transport, you live off the land and whatever you can take from the enemy.
So you reduce your own baggage,
Yep.
literally, and you weaken the enemy at the same time. Pretty clever.
Exactly. You're using resources more efficiently, right? And that resourcefulness, it ties into another fascinating example, the use of fire oxen.
Fire oxen. Okay, you got to tell me about this.
Okay, so picture this. You attach burning material to the horns of oxen,
Whoa.
and you drive them right into the enemy ranks.
That's crazy.
I mean, can you imagine the chaos?
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm starting to see why this book has captivated military minds for so long.
Oh, yeah. It's like a playbook of unconventional tactics.
It really makes you think outside the box.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got these tactical examples, but we also have all these commentaries on top of it. What's that about?
Yeah, it's like we're getting these different layers of wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? We have all these renowned fellows weighing in on Sun Tzu's work, each offering their own unique perspective.
Oh, that's cool. So who are some of these big names?
Well, we've got Cao Cao. You might also know him as Wei Wuti.
Okay.
He was a brilliant military leader, and his commentary is really interesting. It's concise and almost a little cryptic.
Oh, so a man of action offering insight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we have Tu Mu. He was actually a poet. And what's interesting is he didn't have any battlefield experience,
Interesting.
but his commentary is super insightful. He uses all these parallels from history, you know?
So a different kind of expertise, but still valuable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He brings this whole different lens to it. And then, last but not least, we've got Chang Yu.
Oh, right.
His commentary is really known for making Cao Cao's notes more accessible.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, because Cao can be pretty hard to follow sometimes. Chang Yu kind of bridges that gap. You know, he makes it easier for people who maybe aren't military experts to understand.
So he's like a translator.
Yeah, like a translator, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's one more piece of the art of war we haven't even touched on.
Oh, what else is there?
Espionage.
Spies. Oh, man, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, Sun Tzu dedicates a whole section to this. He calls it the 5 types of spies.
5 types. Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me everything.
Well, he breaks it down like this. Local, inward converted, doomed, and surviving. So your local spies, those are the ones recruited from, behind enemy lines.
Okay.
They blend in, they give you intel on the lay of the land, what the locals are thinking, that kind of thing.
So they're your eyes and ears on the ground.
Exactly. Then you've got inward spies.
Oh.
So these are officials or people within the enemy's government or military who you've persuaded to share information.
So they're the ones who can really do some damage.
Oh, yeah. They can sabotage from within.
Man, this is better than a spy movie. All right, so what about converted spies?
Converted spies, these are enemy spies who you've captured and then flipped.
You turned them.
Yeah, turned them. They're the most valuable, though. They know all the enemy's plans.
Whoa.
But you got to be careful with these guys, right? How do you know they won't betray you again?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sun Tzu says you got to treat them well, reward them. You got to build trust.
Make them feel like they're part of the team.
Exactly, yeah. You can't just rely on force. Got to appeal to their, to their better nature.
Okay, so we've got local, inward, converted. What about doomed and surviving? Those sound kind of ominous.
Yeah, a little bit. Doomed spies, those are the ones you send into the enemy camp with false information.
Oh, wow.
You know they're going to get caught, probably. It's all about misleading the enemy.
So they're basically decoys.
Yeah, decoys, sacrificing themselves for the mission.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you have your surviving spies.
Okay.
These are the ones that make it back alive.
After getting all the intel.
Yeah, they bring back the good stuff.
So this is a whole intricate network.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. Even back then, Sun Tzu knew that information was power.
Oh, absolutely. And he gives all this incredibly detailed advice on how to build this network, how to manage it.
That's incredible.
It's really a fascinating part of the book,
Yeah.
And it really has a lot of parallels to how things work today.
Right, so we've gone deep on espionage, but I want to shift gears a little bit. What does all this mean for us today?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
We're not leading armies. I'm not planning a siege. How can we apply these ancient teachings to the 21st century?
Well, that's what we're going to get into in the next part of our deep dive. So we've gone through some of Sun Tzu's main ideas,
Yeah.
victory without fighting, intelligence, all those wild battlefield tactics.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But the question is, how does all this ancient stuff apply to us now?
Right.
What can we learn from it, even if we're not, like, generals or something?
Right. I mean, I'm not planning any sieges anytime soon. But I do think there's something deeper here, something that goes beyond the actual battlefield.
Oh, absolutely. Sun Tzu was getting at the essence of strategy itself. And that's valuable everywhere, in any field. Whenever there's competition or you've got goals to achieve,
Right. Makes sense.
think about your own life.
Yeah.
You strategize all the time, probably without even realizing it.
That's true, actually.
It's in everything, right? From trying to get a promotion at work to planning a vacation.
Yeah.
Even just getting your kids to eat their veggies.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about strategy.
Exactly. And that's where the art of war, it becomes surprisingly relevant. Take the business world, for example. Negotiations are basically like a battlefield.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, that's knowing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And researching the competition, figuring out their goals, anticipating their tactics, well, that's knowing your enemy.
So going into a meeting super prepared, you've already got a leg up, right?
Right. You're setting yourself up for a win before things even get started.
That's amazing.
And just like a general's got to adjust their strategy based on what the enemy's doing, you got to be adaptable in a negotiation too.
Right. Yeah, like be ready to change your offer, come up with the new solutions, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's that be like water idea, right? Always adjusting to the situation.
Yeah,
And even that idea of deception. So obviously, got to be ethical about it.
of course. Yeah.
But in business, it's more like presenting your information strategically, right? Highlighting your strengths, downplaying your weaknesses.
It's like poker. Knowing when to hold 'em, knowing when to fold 'em.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about reading the situation, being smart about it. But the thing is, the art of war is not just for CEOs and entrepreneurs. It applies to personal goals, too.
Okay, so how does Sun Tzu help me, say, reach my fitness goals?
Well, let's say you're trying to get in shape, right?
Yeah.
First, you got to know yourself, just like Sun Tzu says.
Okay.
What are your bad habits? What makes you want to eat all that junk food? What are your weak points?
Right, so it's about being honest with myself.
Exactly. And then, got to know your enemy, too.
Okay, who's the enemy in this case?
Well, it could be your cravings, right?
Right.
Or maybe just a lack of motivation, anything that's getting in the way of your goal.
I see. So step 1, I figure out my weaknesses. Step 2, I figure out what's standing in my way. What then?
Then you build a plan, just like a general preparing for battle.
Okay.
You plan your meals. Maybe you find a workout buddy to keep you accountable.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about those moments where you might be tempted to cheat,
So I'm like planning in advance for those times when my willpower might fail.
Exactly. And if things aren't working, you got to be flexible, right? Maybe working out alone isn't cutting it, so you got to try something new. It's all about adapting, like we were saying before.
I like it. I'm starting to see how all this ancient wisdom really can apply to modern life.
That's pretty cool, right?
It is, though sometimes Sun Tzu sounds a little, well, ruthless. Like that thing about attacking where the enemy is unprepared. How do I apply that to, getting in shape? I don't want to be that guy at the gym judging everyone.
Well, it's all about interpretation, right? Sun Tzu was writing about war where, the stakes were life or death.
Right.
We live in a different world.
Yeah, much more peaceful.
Exactly. So we can take those ideas and adapt them. Instead of deception, it's more like strategic communication,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And instead of attacking where the enemy is unprepared, it's more like seizing opportunities. You take the core wisdom and you apply it in a way that makes sense for you.
Okay, that makes sense. I can attack my bad habits without attacking other people.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right?
So we've covered business goals, personal goals, even getting in shape. But if Sun Tzu were alive today, what do you think he'd be studying? Like, what modern day battlefields would he be interested in?
That's a great question. I think he'd be fascinated by the digital world for sure. The internet, social media, all of that.
Oh, yeah, it's like a whole new world, isn't it?
It is. It's a new kind of warfare where information is the weapon.
Right.
He'd be looking at how information gets used, how it gets manipulated.
Yeah.
The whole thing with cyber warfare,
Yeah, that's a big one.
huge. And the way social media shapes people's opinions, he'd probably say, these are the new battlefields we got to learn how to navigate.
It's true. The battlefield has definitely shifted.
It has. And the weapons are different too. It's not swords and shields anymore. It's algorithms and data.
I can just imagine him studying viral marketing campaigns or like, those political
Oh,
influencers.
totally. He'd be all over that. And cybersecurity too. That would be a big one for him, I bet.
Right, because that's all about protecting information, protecting systems.
Exactly. Knowing your enemy, building your defenses, all that stuff is more relevant now than ever.
And with technology changing so fast, you got to keep adapting, right?
All the time. What worked last year might not work this year. It's about being flexible.
Like Sun Tzu said, be like water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Always adapting. I think that's the main takeaway for our listeners.
So it's not just about the tactics themselves, it's about the mindset.
Right. The strategic mindset.
Yeah.
Being able to analyze the situation, come up with a plan, adapt when you need to, no matter what battlefield you're on.
Love it. So whether we're negotiating a raise or just trying to reach a personal goal, the art of war can help us.
That's the idea. It's about being more aware, more prepared, thinking ahead, not just reacting.
Becoming masters of our own art of war.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. But before we go, I have one final thought for our listeners. So we were talking about Sun Tzu being a guy who was all about adapting, about seeing the world in the strategic way. If he were around today, where do you think he'd be, like, focusing all that strategic energy?
That's a good question. It's not like there are a ton of huge armies clashing on battlefields these days, is it?
Yeah, not so much anymore.
So I think he'd be looking at where the real power is, where things are changing, where new kinds of influence are happening.
It's not just about tanks and soldiers anymore.
Right. It's not. It's more about ideas and perceptions. That's where the real battles are fought now.
Okay, so where do you see those battles playing out?
Definitely the digital world, social media, all those algorithms, how information spreads, and how it can be used to manipulate people. It's like a whole new kind of warfare.
It's true. The way things go viral, how people get swayed by what they see online, it's crazy powerful.
And Sun Tzu was all about understanding power. I think he'd be fascinated by all of that.
I can almost see him like analyzing a Twitter campaign or something, breaking it down like it's a military maneuver.
He'd probably have a whole bunch of charts and diagrams figuring out how to win the internet.
I mean, speaking of modern warfare, what about cybersecurity? That's got to be something he'd be all over, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Protecting data, systems, all of that, it's crucial now.
It's like a whole different front line.
It is. And a lot of Sun Tzu's ideas apply directly, right? Like knowing your enemy, anticipating their moves.
Yeah, those hackers, they're like the new enemy army.
Exactly. Always trying to find a weakness, exploit a vulnerability.
So we got to be prepared. We got to build up our defenses.
And that's where, Sun Tzu's advice is so relevant.
It's not just about technology, it's about mindset.
Right. It's that whole idea of being adaptable,
Right.
Always adjusting, always staying ahead of the curve.
Which is tough when technology is changing so fast, isn't it?
It is. Things are constantly evolving. What worked last year might not work this year, right?
So, like Sun Tzu said, be like water. Always flowing, always changing.
Exactly. I think that's a key lesson for all of us. It's not just about the tactics. It's about that strategic way of thinking.
It's about being able to analyze things, plan things out, and change course when you need to.
Right. You got to be adaptable, whether you're running a business, negotiating a deal, or just trying to reach a personal goal.
It's like life itself is a kind of battlefield.
Yeah, in a way it is. We're always facing challenges, always trying to overcome obstacles.
And the people who can think strategically, they're the ones who are going to come out on top.
For sure. So, yeah, even though Sun Tzu was writing about ancient warfare, his wisdom, it still applies today.
Absolutely. It's about being more aware, more prepared, always thinking a few steps ahead, becoming, like we said earlier, masters of our own art of war.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even if he were alive today, I think Sun Tzu would be doing the same thing. Always learning, always adapting.
Staying ahead of the curve.
Yeah, because the world never stops changing, does it?
It doesn't. Well, that's a fantastic point to wrap things up on. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the art of war.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah.
Always a good one to revisit.
Until next time, everyone, keep strategizing. You never know when those skills might come in handy.